we're going into what we're going to have a topical study for tonight. We're getting into late October, so we're going into a study, just moving into the next 3 months. We're going to have a couple of holidays, as of course of this world will call it. The reason for the season is our topical study for tonight. We'll see there in 2 Timothy 4:2, we're starting out with the first verse for tonight. We see there it says, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. So when we talk about seasons, we see there for the verse, the actions that the body of Christ and members of the body of Christ would need to be doing during the seasons. We see that they preach the word, be instant in season and out of season. So when it comes to the seasons, we're seeing just in a couple of verses what Paul would say to do during that time would be preach the word. We have a couple of seasons coming up as far as holidays, as far as events coming up. We're reaching the end of October, so we would have commonly what will be known as Halloween, moving into Thanksgiving, moving into Christmas, as the world would call it. And so we'll take a look at some of these things. Are these Christians oriented? Are these biblically oriented? Are these dispensationally oriented? That type of thing. Take a look at them. We'll look at their origins. We'll see what we see in them. And so we look at some of these things here. We see that we'll try to see if they're declared that, as the holidays are almost upon us. It's good that we know the reason for the seasons as they're coming up. What are the reasons? You see bumper stickers saying Jesus is the reason for the season. A lot of times people try to put Jesus in something he was never in the first place, and we've got to find out why that is, what's going on. And so many people try to put Christ into American holidays, especially during October, November, December. And sometimes he's never belonged there in the first place, and he never will. We'll see that there in Galatians chapter 4, verse 9. Some of the things he said, and this was concerning the Galatians, as they were tricked into obeying some of the religious holidays under the law by the Judaizers coming into the scene. What they had done is they had told the Galatians that they had to do everything from being circumcised to obeying the law. We see that such are the things that had come up in Galatians 4, in verse 9. He had said, but now after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? Ye observe days and months and times and years. I am afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. Now, this, of course, would be talking about the days concerning the 613 points of law, where there were days they had to observe. There were things that they had to do as far as the Jews under law. And the Judaizers came into the Galatians saying that they had to obey the law in order to either keep their salvation or keep up with that, so they were tricked. That's why it's good to have the book of Galatians. I understand you don't have to keep certain days in order to gain points with Christ, or whatever may be, or points with God. So that was Galatians. And we just saw 2 Timothy 4:2. There's more. We're in 1 Thessalonians 5:1. We won't necessarily turn to it, but he says that as far as the times and the seasons, you have no need that I even write unto you concerning the body of Christ. And the other one is Romans 14:6. And Romans 14:6 makes a good point as well for the body of Christ. It's a good point bringing up concerning all this, because no matter what gets brought up to the body of Christ's attention, at some points you're going to do what you're going to do. And we see in Romans 14:6, it says, he that regardeth the day, regardeth it unto the Lord. And he that regardeth not the day, to the Lord he doth not regard it. And we see that little message brought in for the body of Christ, talking about how days are regarded. They're regarded unto the Lord. And even when you choose not to uphold the day, you do that for the Lord as well. And so we see that's a thing that we see there. And so he goes on to say this. And even as far as verse 8 in Romans 14, for whether we live unto the Lord, and whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore die, we are the Lord's. And so it's a whole thing that we're seeing. The whole point is this is not a salvation issue. This is not a hardcore issue where if you do this or don't do this, you're going to hell or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's a matter of just getting into the point of understanding literally the reason for the season. So as we go through our outline, we're seeing the idea of a season, as we saw that from 2 Timothy 4:2 and 1 Thessalonians 5:1, Romans 14:6, and Galatians 4. And the idea of the days and the seasons and everything else like that. The definition of a season per se is proper or suitable period of time, possibly indefinite or unspecified in some cases, And so you see that even in Ecclesiastes talks about for everything there's a season. And so you see these different things come up in the Bible talking about the concept of a season. And so the first one we'll go through as we go through our outline, here we are in October. We're pushing into late October now. I would see the concept of Halloween. So just reading from the outline, just the things we have here, even that comes up from as we move into Encyclopedia Britannica. Some of this just comes up right from the encyclopedia. Not per se right here, but we have it in quotation marks on our outline. It goes on just talk about how the heathen proudly own it, albeit Judaism doesn't observe it. You know, Jew, someone who calls himself a Jew today, is not going to run to it and claim it all and say, well, that's my holiday, that's my holy day. They're not going to run off and claim Halloween as their own, like it's something they need to observe religiously. They're not going to do that as Jew. Neither does Islam. Islam actually says that they're going to hold off on that, and they abstain from that, and that's something that they're not going to run off and do as well. Even Hindus, they observe something called Diwali during this time, so that's actually getting in their way. They're not going to bother with it. Heathen once practiced witchcraft and divination by bobbing for apples, creating fires, giving treats to the souls that once previously died. And in order to keep the evil spirits away, they made lights out of vegetables. And in this case, you see with the pumpkin, the jack-o'-lantern may come from, keep away evil spirits. And so, it turned into All Hallows Eve. As Roman Catholicism came in, we kind of looked at the idea of this when we were studying manuscript evidence. Rome took over everything. They started putting in and taking over pagan rituals and plugging it into their religion and everything. We saw that it became a religious, Catholic religious holy day of obligation. And so they called it All Hallows Eve, as it was rituals for the dead. They took lights and put them in the vegetables to light the way for the dead and pray for the dead and everything else. They said, well, let's have Roman Catholicism came along and said, well, let's turn it into a Day of the Dead, and let's pray for the dead as well. All Hallows Eve. They went forth with that, and they built upon this, a heathen ritual, pagan ritual. They're now to pray for the dead. And so they threw Christianity into the heathen customs, Christianity, quote unquote, it's Roman Catholicism, and they gave it a name, and it became All Saints' Day, a day to honor the saints, those that died. And again, saints, not saints as in the body of Christ, saints as in you had to do a million good things or a lot of good things, and then the Pope would declare who is or who isn't, according by Roman Catholic standards, by good works for salvation, a saint. And then once they died, you'd pray to them and hope they're okay and talk to them, whatever it is, which is all wrong in itself. But this is the point of where they're going with this All Saints' Day, All Hallows Eve, pray for the dead, and it all had to do with this. When the Reformation came, October 31st became Reformation Day, and declared that All Hallows Eve will be used to mock the devil and his false rituals. The heathen, they mock the devil. They think he doesn't exist. And they, don't believe in him. And yet there is a devil. This from, if we look at Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, I believe it is. Isaiah 14, verse 12. We go there. What we see there is not only is there a devil, a definite 100% real, actual being called the devil. Not with the red horns, not with the pitchfork, not with the red skin, not with everything else, but an actual devil who lives in defiance of God. But you can read his 5-point plan for who he is and what he thinks and how his what his heart's desire is. 5 things about it. In Isaiah chapter 14, starting in verse 12, says, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which dost weaken the nations? He says, for thou hast said in thine heart. So this is what you're reading. You're reading his heart here. I will ascend into heaven. That's number 1. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. That's number 2. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Number 3. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. Number 4. I will be like the Most High. So he's going to counterfeit. He's going to do everything that the Most High does. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to counterfeit it. Whatever he does, I'm going to make a copy of it and make it my own. If God wants people to worship him, I want people to worship me. And this is, you're seeing this in Isaiah 14. And so the devil is real. He wants people to not only worship him, but stop worshiping the one true God. Heart's desire is that there really is a devil. So on Halloween, People, mock the devil. They laugh and say people dress up like the devil. There really is a devil, and he's not red skinned. He doesn't have a pitchfork. He doesn't have horns and anything like that. He's out there trying to get people to worship him and not trust the gospel. So there really is a devil. When it comes to the idea of ghosts, if you look at Genesis 25, verse 8, Genesis 25, verse 8, people say, well, I don't, there's no such thing as ghosts, and I saw Ghostbusters, and I saw Halloween movies, and, whatever, however you want to spin that. Genesis 25, verse 8 gives a good example of Abraham. And in turn, what's going to happen to all of us at one point, unless we're caught up. Genesis 25, verse 8 says, then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered unto his people. When he died, he gave up the ghost. Talking about his soul, his spirit, that type of thing. And that's a phrase I put in, talking about he gave up the ghost. Gave up. Everyone's going to do that. And so the idea, do you believe in the devil? Do you believe in the ghost? Do you believe in these things? You believe in devils. The Bible never declares demon once. Let's talk about devils. Let's talk about the devil. Let's talk about ghosts. Not like the ghosts you see in these horror movies or you used to watch in the 80s of Scooby-Doo or nothing like that. But you do see ghosts in the Bible. It's there. Nonetheless, it's in a biblical dispensational understanding, not in a silly manner that you see on the television. So we see that there in what we're reading about. And so we're seeing the reason for the season as it actually plugs into dispensational context and biblical understanding, not how we see this in the culture, in society, in America today. So we're seeing that the Halloween had, now we're going into what we're looking at, right from the Encyclopedia Britannica, as far as its origins go. Halloween had its origins in the festival, of Samhain among the Celts of ancient Britain and Ireland. On the day corresponding to November 1st, on contemporary calendars, the new year was believed to begin. That date was considered the beginning of the winter period, the date on which the herds were returned from pasture and land tenures were renewed. During the Samhain festival, the souls of those who had died were believed to return to visit their homes, and those who had died during the year were believed to journey to the other world. People set bonfires on hilltops for relighting their hearth fires for the winter and to frighten away evil spirits. And there's where you get those vegetables being lit, jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkins. And sometimes wore masks and other disguises to avoid being recognized by the ghosts thought to be present. So you see, this is where people are dressing up. They're trying to hide themselves from who they think are ghosts, that people who died in the past. It was in those ways that beings such as witches, hobgoblins, fairies, and demons came to be associated with the day. The period was also thought to be favorable for divination on matters such as marriage, health, and death. When the Romans conquered the Celts in the 1st century, they added their own festivals of Ferialia, commemorating the passing of the dead, and Pomona, the goddess of the harvest. So we're seeing there's nothing there that has to do or correlates at all with the Bible rightly divided. Mid-Acts dispensational right division, the King James Bible, the Apostle Paul's pattern. Nothing's in it. And so when we come into, there's still some benefit that a ambassador can take from this. And I have that here in our next verse here. And what we see is that we can still operate in wisdom concerning this. If we look at 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, when we come up to this, I believe it's in about 10 days from now, somewhere around there. When it comes to Halloween, that's coming up towards the end of this month, specifically as this video is being made right now. 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11. Some points we'll look at here. We're seeing here that we will have opportunity with this American cultural holiday coming up. And we see there it says that lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. So we know that we're not going to be ignorant of what's coming up. We just saw that there is no biblical dispensational context whatsoever concerning what's going on. Knowing this, we can go forth and operate in truth. And as we know this to be true, we can go ahead and see the benefit that comes up. As we know, we can, 2 Timothy 4:5, do the work of an evangelist. That's number one. But number two, also, we can walk in wisdom, Colossians 4:5, and find opportunity to give gospel tracts. Instead of trying to go out and reach people, the people are going to come to your front door. And as they do that, what we like to do every year is we'll still give them candy, of course, but you can also put gospel tracts with the gospel of salvation with the child or children or people that come to your front door. You know, put the gospel with they're pretty much coming up to your door, putting a bag right in front of you. So put the gospel, put a gospel tract, and write something with the gospel on it, put some candy in there, and let them go their way. You've given multiple people, multiple children, multiple opportunities for the gospel. And if you're talking with trick-or-treater, you're talking with people, you can also discuss these Halloween origins with them. You can talk with believers about the gospel. You can talk with unbelievers about the gospel. You have opportunities to do so concerning everything that comes up here in October. And so we see this as the first part of our outline here, the reason for the season, moving into where we are in October. Nothing biblical about it, but opportunity does come up to present this. You can talk about the devil, his purposes, his plans in the dispensation of grace. You can talk about the concept of ghosts and how you can work that in, and also talk about the gospel. So we see that there, and there's opportunity. So as we continue forward, we can also move in now in part 3 of our outline. We got past the intro, we got past October, now we're moving into November. As you move into November, now we're going into Thanksgiving. So this is something we want to look at and find something in regards to this. And there's going to be a little bit of context in there concerning even manuscript evidence. You'll be able to see how this plugs in as well. And so we go into our outline, we read that when the Dark Ages were ending and the explorers stopped being Catholics, such as Ponce de Leon or Pizarro, in search of conquest due to the critical text for Rome, and we talked about the critical text and the perfectly preserved text and all these things, and to stop being about conquests for Romanism, we're seeing more that the majority text opened up more and more opportunities for, say, the Pilgrims and the Puritans who emigrated from England in the 1620s and 1630s, and carried the traditions of days and fastings, days of Thanksgiving with them into New England. The modern Thanksgiving holiday tradition is traced to a well-recorded 1619 event in Virginia, and sparsely documented 1621 celebration at the Plymouth in present-day Massachusetts. And so we see a little bit about that there, but the 1619 arrival of 38 English settlers in Berkeley Hundred in Charles City County, Virginia, concluded with a religious celebration, as dictated by the group's charter from the London Company, which required that the day of our ships at the arrival to place a sign in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day Thanksgiving to Almighty God. And so the Pilgrims said this as they had shown up there. And this is, of course, as we get into the origins, as we go back to the historical reason, they had said this, going back to where they were. They went from England to Massachusetts, and just generally, there's a whole more story behind it. But the feast and Thanksgiving were prompted by a good harvest. The Pilgrims celebrated this with the Native Americans who had helped them get through the previous winter by giving them food at that time of scarcity. The Puritans didn't rightly divide, and not during the first few years of Cape Cod, at least, and not by choice. They had found out the hard way. They had actually gone to Cape Cod in Massachusetts. They started doing Acts chapter 2. And when you go there, if you look there real quick, we'll go to Acts chapter 2, verse 44. Of course, we know Acts chapter 2 is not the birthday of the church. It has nothing to do with the body of Christ. It has nothing to do about every church in town is going to say, well, that's the birthday of the church. But when they got there to Cape Cod, the Pilgrims started doing Acts chapter 2, verse 44. And if you look there, we'll see that can actually be something that does not work out very well. Acts chapter 2, verse 44. This is what they did. And it says there that and all that believed were together and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods and parted them to all men as every man had need. So they, instead of spreading out and trying to work things together and every man do as Paul had said in Thessalonians about if man neither does man work, neither does he eat, said they had done Acts chapter 2. And as they did this, it started to work on them. It started to work on them in a bad way. And so they had sold all their positions, or sold their positions. They had brought everything together instead of working and spreading out. So we see that there. But it says that rarely did anyone possess the motivation to labor to benefit every other family without extra benefit to their own. And the people didn't work. Common goods became less and less because they were looking at Luke 12, 24 and 18:22, where the Lord had said, they were to sell everything that they owned, and they'd have treasures in heaven, and that they were to count on God to give them everything that they needed. And so as they did this, it wasn't working. And so we can see that this was a bit of right division that they needed to sort out, and it eventually worked itself out, not because they had somebody teach them to go to Paul, but they figured that out the hard way. And so we see that there. So the Puritans didn't rightly divide, and this is something that even the Puritans figured out, the Pilgrims figured out faster than Karl Marx, because Marxists and socialists are still trying to get this taught to people today. And as this is happening, people are working less and less, and therefore the motivation to labor and to benefit everyone, becomes less and less. And so common goods become less and less. And you can see that happening today. You're getting that socialism. So that's what's happening to Karl Marx, the Acts chapter 2 idea. People run to Acts chapter 2 to say that Jesus was a socialist. And that's not where we're running with this today, because we're seeing this right division taking place, Acts chapter 9 and beyond, with the Apostle Paul as our pattern, not Acts chapter 2 as our pattern. So we see that there. But Acts 2 and Luke 12 is what the Puritans did, what the Pilgrims did. So there's that little part of right division in 1619, 1620, and 1621. And we see the origin of what's going on with Thanksgiving. Now, Thanksgiving, of course, the idea, the concept of giving Thanksgiving, of having thanks, there's nothing wrong with that. The scriptures talk about that. We look at Psalm 95 in verse 2. There's always a purpose and a point to Thanksgiving, rightful Thanksgiving. Psalm 95 verse 2 shows the psalmist, and shows in the Psalms, people always giving thanks unto the Lord. And that was the right thing to do. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So Psalm 95 verse 2. We see there it says, let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. This is King David talking. And make a joyful noise unto him with songs. And so we saw that this is something that they did there. We go just 5 chapters over to Psalm 100 in verse 4. Goes on to read that to enter into his gates with thanksgiving. Of course, the body of Christ isn't meaning there any gates, unless they're flying out on an airplane somewhere. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. And so we see they're going into the idea of, Thanksgiving again. Thanksgiving is a right thing. We see this in the scripture. It's a right concept. It's a good thing. Even when it comes to Pauline scriptures, Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. And in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6, we see here, talking about the concept of thanksgiving as a rightful thing to do. Even when it comes to the concept of prayer, Philippians 4:6 says, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known unto God. So you can let your requests be made known by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. So thanksgiving is not to be excluded from your prayer life. As you talk to God and give thanks unto God and everything else, let your requests be made known. Well, we see that there, and it goes on in Ephesians 5 as well. And so every day is an opportunity to give thanks unto God. You have your thanksgiving, let your thanksgiving be known. Nothing wrong with that. But what we're looking at here is the more concept of it being historical and national. As far as we're plugging this into November, we're looking at the concept of what happened with the Puritans and the Pilgrims in 1619, moving into 1621. That concept. We're looking at it historically. We're looking at it nationally. The origins of it as we move into that. And so this would plug in more with, again, Colossians 4:5 from what we saw in October about walking in wisdom, finding the opportunity in it to do so when we do so. And Romans 14:6 is led every day unto the Lord, that we know that when you regard it unto the Lord. And if you choose not to regard it, then you do that unto the Lord. But whatever you do it unto the Lord. If you're going to uphold it, this is not a matter where it needs to be upheld to up to the T. You're doing this out of respect for the nation that you live in. And in this case, we're looking at Thanksgiving. It'd be out of respect that you would do this in the first place. There's of course a debate today just culturally that, and this goes on to say that uh, they're doing something with the Indians, hurting the Indians. It's bad to upset the Indians and everything else. It's one of those wild things, and we don't want to go down that trail of lies. But we see that out of respect for what occurred in 1619 through 1621, out of respect for the nation, out of respect for everything else, Thanksgiving, especially unto God, as they did, as we would like to learn from that concept, that rightful pattern. Paul says a pattern of good works is a good thing. We would go forth and operate that as so. And so as we go forth with that, seeing that they had fled from Romanism in the first place, based on the critical text versus the perfectly preserved text, and it led them over to Massachusetts. We have the holiday as a result. We can take that opportunity, Colossians 4:5, to walk in wisdom. We can use that opportunity to talk about the Puritans, the idea of Acts chapter 2, verse 44 versus 2 Thessalonians 3:10 through 12, talking about if you talk to somebody at Thanksgiving dinner and you're passing around the food, you can say, by the way, do you know what the Puritans, they were doing Acts chapter 2, if somebody can get that far with you. You can talk to them about Acts chapter 2 versus 2 Thessalonians 3. Talk about today we provide. If you don't work, you don't eat, versus what they had done in 1619. Use that as a conversation piece. Use that as something to talk about the scriptures with. Use that as something to dive deeper into the gospel with, into the Bible with, into dispensationalism. Show them there's two different verses in two different places for two different people. Talk about right division. They're at the dinner table. Using the Puritans, using this Thanksgiving opportunity. You can also talk to them with family about the gospel, and there's no wrong time to talk about the gospel, anytime. You can also talk about the manuscript evidence about how they fled from the corrupt text with the pure text, that they can go forth and do that as well. And then talk about the concept of Thanksgiving. You can find Thanksgiving in the Psalms. You can find Thanksgiving in Philippians 4. You can find Thanksgiving in Ephesians 5. And that Thanksgiving is never a wrong thing. So we see that there. As we look at November, just as we see that in October, and how we're seeing the reason for the season is always going to be something mid-acts dispensational concerning right division. It's always going to be something about the Lord, but it doesn't have to necessarily be specifically October 31st, specifically on Thanksgiving Day. It's all the time. It's 24/7. You can pray without ceasing. You don't have to wait for the day to come up to do right, to give gifts. You can give a gift today to somebody. You can do it all the time. There's no wrong reason to run with the crowd. There's no wrong reason to run with the course of this world, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of those which believe not. We can do what we need to do today. So we see that there in October, we see that there in November, and we see the big one coming up is going to be December. And so this one, moving into Christmas, or December 25th, December in general, for those that do the 4-week ordeal, is going to be, I believe it's Advent, is a study that goes all the way back to Genesis with Nimrod and Semiramis and his mother and Molech, and moves up through Moses' time. Goes into Constantine in 312, which we also looked at through our study on manuscript evidence. And it goes all the way up to the critical text and how he did not want to worship Jesus as God. And yet he wanted to continue to take what Nimrod started back in Genesis. And Constantine moved it forward. Even as Eusebius copied and made 50 corrupt text, corrupt issues. He wanted to go forth and continue with that. It moved all the way into 1659, and even through the pilgrims who refused Romanism and the Mass of the Christ, they fled all that. They fled the corrupt text, they fled the Mass of the Christ, they fled all these things. And it'll go into where we're going to go now with certain videos.
Do you know when Jesus was born? What month was Jesus born? Now, I know we typically celebrate it on December 25th, but that's not when he was actually born. Let's take a look at what the scriptures say of when he was born to further point the significance of this, because Christ points us to the Feast of Tabernacles. Look on the screen and you'll see the festival months listed out with the priestly divisions. I'll explain that in a second. In Luke 1 verse 5, it says, in the days of Herod, the king of Judah, there was a priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah. And he had a wife from the daughter of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Verse 8, now it happened that while he was performing his priestly service before God in the appointed order of his division, according to the custom of the priestly office, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. Here's Zechariah. He's one of the priests. He's of the division of Abijah. And the division of Abijah in 1 Chronicles 24 verse 7 says it's the 8th division. So you can see on the screen there, the 8th division would fall in the month of June. You say, why is that significant? How is this pointing to Christ's birth? Well, let's keep reading in Luke. In Luke 1:23, it says, when the days of his priestly service were ended, he went back home. Verse 24, after these days, Elizabeth, his wife, became pregnant, and she kept herself in seclusion for 5 months. So if you see on the screen, I'm going to just count 5 months from the time after he does his priestly service. And we come to November, that's the 5th month. And then in verse 26, it says, now in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a virgin named Mary. He says, don't be afraid. You've been found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name his name Jesus. So she conceives in the 6th month. And now, let me ask you this question. If Mary conceives in the 6th month, and if you're looking on the chart, when should she have Jesus? Yeah, she should have Jesus around 9-ish months later or so. So if you count 9 months from December, you see that September or October should be Jesus' birth. Let me ask you this. What festival was happening in September and October? That's right. It was the trumpets. It was the atonement. It was tabernacles.
So yeah, so that's when we saw these videos. We've included some videos in the links in the bottom there. Go along with the idea of Christmas and how it does not line up with anything biblical or dispensational, being the reason for the season. We've looked through and we've seen, based on everything in October, based on everything in November, based on everything in December, we're finding there's reasons for what's going on. There are reasons, and they may not be biblical reasons, they may not be mid-acts dispensational reasons, they may not be reasons that are according to right division or Pauline mid-acts reasons. But we are finding reasons for the seasons. They're all kind of turning out to be different ideas, whether they go back to Roman Catholicism, All Hallows Eve and the Dead in October, or whether they be in December concerning everything going back to things that have to do with Molech, having to do with Genesis and Nimrod, having to do with Constantine and 312. That would be some of the videos that you see. And everything else that leads up to what we're seeing again with Romanism and Roman Catholicism, the Mass of the Christ in December, all the way to what we looked at even in November, the idea of how the pilgrims actually had to flee from the corrupt text in Romanism just to land in Massachusetts, have a celebration of thanks, and that we rejoice in the fact that they gave thanks. But we see that this is what's coming up over the next 3 months, and we find opportunity not only on those 3 specific reasons for the seasons, but we can find reason in every day to continue to pray ceasing, which is the will of God, to continue to get the gospel out to people. There doesn't have to be ceasing in doing so, but to continue to give out the gospel no matter what's going on. We don't have to follow the course of this world where we move about doing certain things or stop doing certain things or move ahead, purchasing gifts or setting up food because the world does it. If we do so to give God glory. We do so in accordance with Romans 14:6. Whatever we do for the glory of God. What we don't do, we do for the glory of God. Whatever we do, it's all for the glory of God. Romans 14:6. We also saw from 1 Thessalonians 5:1 in regards to what we do during the season. And we're to be in season and out of season during the season, preaching the gospel, getting the gospel out to those who are lost, which also lines up with 1 Timothy chapter 4, or 2, verse 4. And so knowing what is the reason for the season in October, what is the reason for the season in November, and what is the reason for the season in December, understanding Christ is not born on December 25th, and more so he was right now. And knowing that Christ is to be given thanks not only during the time of Thanksgiving, but we can give him thanks today, last month, next month, 6 months down the road, and we should have been given thanks 6 months ago. We know that we don't pray for the dead in a week from now, and on All Hallows Eve or Halloween, we continue to operate as and walk as dead, because we know that from the seminar we just saw, that we walk as dead, giving thanks unto God for what he did for us on the cross. And so we see the reason for the season is not going to be anything more but what it already was, which is to be Pauline in all that we do, serving the Lord Jesus Christ, preaching him according to the revelation of the mystery, Romans 16:25 and 26. According to the scriptures, rightly divided, 2 Timothy 2:15, using all for our disposal, 2 Timothy 3:16. So knowing that and understanding that going forward, we'll go ahead, and it's kind of been rough with the cameras tonight, but we'll go ahead and stop here.
There are many people who don't really understand what Christmas is really about and where it comes from. There are millions of atheists, agnostics, and even a lot of Christians who have really been misinformed as to what Christmas is really about. If you want to be able to share the true meaning of Christmas, it's vitally important to thoroughly understand its history. So what I want to do is I want to take us through a walk through the history of Christmas, its many traditions, which most of us have pretty much grown up to love. This you can all follow along in the dictionary, history books, world religion textbooks, the scriptures, the church fathers, pretty much all the major religion, or all the different denominations will admit these things readily, some of them very proudly. Let's talk about the date of December 25th, first of all. You know, many non-believers are more than happy to point out that December 25th is not the historical birth of Jesus, and that this date is found nowhere in Scripture. They'll also enthusiastically go on to claim that this really is in fact the long celebrated birthday of numerous heathen sun gods. You know, in order to accurately represent the one true God of the Scriptures, we need to be able to be intellectually honest and take a real careful look at the historical and scriptural facts concerning Christmas. The high day of ancient sun worship historically occurred every December 25th, when the sun displayed its unconquerability, when it began to rise higher in the sky following the winter solstice. Hence, December 25th was celebrated as the sun's birthday. This pagan religious practice was the first historical observance of December 25th as being a holy day. So we can go back to the beginning of the story and take a look at really the first Christmas. The story, a lot of people don't realize it's a lot older than we think, actually begins over 4,000 years ago in the land of Shinar, also called Babylon. according to the book of Genesis, he was the great-grandson of Noah and was the king of Shinar, Babylon. He is depicted in the Bible as both being a man of power and a mighty hunter. He also appears in numerous legends and folktales outside the Bible as well. It was King Nimrod who led the first world revolt against God after the flood, when he established the Babylonian world tyranny and constructed the infamous Tower of Babel. You know, Nimrod actually married his own mother, whose name was Semiramis. Nimrod's birthday was December 25th, the same day considered by pagans to be the birth of the sun. Nimrod was pretty much adored by his people as a god. Considered by many historians to have been the first sun god upon which all the other sun god legends were based upon, this Nimrod story. After God destroyed the Tower of Babel, Nimrod was, according to a lot of legends, was killed by Noah's son Shem, and his body was castrated and his parts were spread all across the land of Shinar. After Nimrod's death, his widowed mother wife, so-called Semiramis, she claimed that she had become impregnated by the rays of the sun. And later, that next December 25th, baby Tammuz was born. Baby Tammuz is in the scriptures a lot of places too. They're worshiping baby Tammuz, weeping for baby Tammuz, and God didn't like that too much. As you know, he was born again as the reincarnated sun god of Nimrod. Semiramis also claimed that a full-grown evergreen tree sprang overnight from a dead stump, which symbolized the re-erection of the new penis of Nimrod, or in other words, the springing forth of new life. You know, on each anniversary of his birth, every December 25th, Nimrod would visit the evergreen tree and leave gifts upon it. That's where a lot of the Yule log comes from that they'd throw in the fire, and then the next day it would be re-erected as the full tree, and the serpent was wrapped around it. That's where that comes from, that story of Nimrod. In Egypt, after God confounded the languages at the Tower of Babel, the story of Nimrod, Semiramis, and baby Tammuz was spread across the earth in over 70 languages. In Egypt, Horus, the son of Isis, the Egyptian title for the Queen of Heaven, was born at this very same time of December 25th. In accordance with the story of Nimrod, ancient Egyptians used to bring trees into their homes for their winter solstice festivals, in which children placed gifts at the bottom, you know, and Sirius, the dog star, really a representation of Anubis, was placed at the top of the tree. The Egyptians even dipped balls in gold and silver. They'd cut testicles off animals or sacrifices, and they'd hang them from their trees. It represented the testicles of their sun god Ra, like a fertility kind of deal. One of the early roots of the modern Christmas character Santa Claus was actually the god Molech, or Chemosh. Every December 25th on the ancient calendar, this is recorded in the Bible too, a public child mass or sacrifice was held. The head priest would stoke this iron image of the enthroned Molech with wood and burning pitch, and they'd turn it into this giant glowing red furnace. And then the people, they'd take and make a long list of the desires that they wanted, and they'd recite them to their god of prosperity, you know, just before they put their infant children into the red-hot lap of the glowing red god. And he was wearing a Phrygian cap, too, just like Santa Claus, that Phrygian cap. That was one of the caps on the statues that they had there, too. A very interesting similarity. That's actually the roots of the Santa Claus character. Kind of sick, the priests would interpret revelations through the screaming of the burning babies. So they'd get these revelations from their god through the screams of these babies. Kind of sick. In Rome, there was the largest pagan religion which fostered sun worship in the Greek and Roman worlds at this time was the cult of Mithraism. like the other sun gods, was supposedly born on December 25th as well. They called it the nativity of the sun. The Romans separated this winter holiday into several different parts. First, from the 17th to the 21st of December was Saturnalia, a riotous feast laden with drunkenness and violent orgies. Second, on the 22nd, they had the second feast, which was Sigillaria, or they called it the Feast of Dolls, when a fair was held, and dolls and other toys, mostly of earthenware, were given to children. December 25th came Brumalia, otherwise called Dies Natalis Invictisolis, or the birthday of the unconquered sun. This is when the days begin to lengthen after the solstice. So you see there's interchange of presents. That it all rings very true of what kind of we see today. There's numerous winter solstice practices involving gift giving, riotous drinking, decorated trees. The child sacrifice rituals are practiced throughout pagan Europe. From tree decorated in Germany to Thor pulling the magical sleigh across the sky in Scandinavia. Most of the Christmas traditions we are familiar with today share these same roots with King Nimrod, really, is where it all started. Then around 2,000 years ago, the world was changed forever. The one in which Moses spoke of, the Son of the living God, the Messiah, he was born in the town of Bethlehem in the land of Israel. Interestingly, this new Messiah was the only one whose date of birth was uniquely separate from all the other pagan messiahs before him. Most historical and scriptural evidence suggests that he was actually born during the Feast of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, when the Word was made flesh and tabernacled, or in the Greek, dwelt among us. That actually puts the birth of the Jewish Messiah, commonly known as Jesus of Nazareth, in the month of Tishri, which would be Septemberish, totally separate from the December 25th sun god birth dates. The apostles in the early Christian church, they abstained from adulterating themselves against their God by participating in these ancient Babylonian sun god festivities. In their scriptures, their God had clearly warned them that doing such actions, in his name especially, were really an abomination to him. Look up the word abomination. church had no desire really to adopt the ancient December 25th sun god rituals, as it was very content in its enjoying its own feast days, which their scriptures instructed them to keep. Their Messiah had demonstrated and explained the meanings of which throughout his ministry. It wasn't even until nearly 300 years later that Christianity even touched the Christmas idea. Oh, yep, Constantine, one of the most interesting historical figures. The Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, he converted to Christianity following his battle at Milvian Bridge in 312. The next year, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, declaring the entire Roman Empire to be Christian. Despite his decrees, really, Constantine himself was a loyal follower of the new popular Roman soldiers cult from Persia, Mithraism. Mithraism is, it's like many of the other Babylonian sun worship religions. They regularly grow by absorbing and mixing in with the new popular religions as they come along. When the Mithraic priests in Rome were converted to Christians at the stroke of Constantine's pen, they naturally modified their Mithraic religion to adapt to the Rome's new Christian denomination. Many of the old Roman gods were just given like new Christian names, although a majority of the Mithraic religious practices and traditions actually remained completely intact. Constantine, although he's Christian in name, he was really a follower of Mithra until the day he died. You can find bronze coins inscribed "Sol Invictus Mithra." They're minted by Saint Constantine between the 313 and 326. After his supposed Christian conversion in 312, Saint Constantine later died in 337. Mithra, the god of Mithraism, his birth, as were all the other Babylonian sun gods, was celebrated on December 25th. But with the new Christian denomination for the Roman Empire, the feast of Sol Invictus Mithra was then celebrated in honor of the new Christ. So they just switched it from Mithra to Christ, just the name. The first mention of December 25th is being celebrated as the date of Jesus' birth is found, I think, in early Roman calendars from 336. Judging by Constantine's edicts, he seemed to kind of favor Mithraism more than he seemed to favor the Christian church in a lot of ways. By his laws, he issued a lot of really strict edicts banning all the Hebrew feasts and weekly Sabbaths, which Jesus and his apostles and the early church had all kept. But anyone who went against Constantine's edicts and tried to do any of these things which they sounded Jewish, they suffered greatly, sometimes under penalty of death. Soon thereafter, the removal of the Hebrew scriptures from the hands of the lay people, which the Hebrew scriptures strictly prohibit the practice of paganism in the face of God, especially. Just removing the scriptures helped to quell any opposition to the melding of paganism with Christianity that took place later on. Christmas was celebrated pretty much after that as the birth of Jesus by most of the church for a long time, pretty much until the reintroduction of the scriptures in the native tongues during the Reformation. Christmas before the late 1800s was really wild. You had violence and drunkenness, rioting, widespread orgies, pretty much echo to the holiday's ancient pagan roots. There were even times the midwinter bash got so out of control that Christmas in many cases was totally banned. When Oliver Cromwell and his Puritan forces took over England in 1645, they vowed to rid English of decadence, and as part of their effort, they outlawed Christmas. Later, by popular demand, Charles II was restored to the throne, and with him came the return of the popular holiday. A lot of people are kind of surprised also to learn that Christmas was not a popular holiday in early America. The Pilgrims, the English separatists that came to America in like 1620, they were well aware of the chaotic behavior associated with Christmas back in Europe. from like 1659 to 1681, the celebration of Christmas was actually outlawed in Boston. Anyone exhibiting the Christmas spirit was fined 5 shillings. Even Congress was in session on December 25th in 1789, the first Christmas under America's new Constitution. Christmas wasn't even declared a holiday, a federal holiday, until June 26, 1870. It wasn't until a lot later, when you had a lot more corporate advertising from companies like Coca-Cola, and these popular poems came out like The Night Before Christmas. These things had a huge influence on the tone of Christmas in modern America. Christmas today in America has become centered on materialism, really, where the main focal point of the holiday is on fulfilling the dream of more stuff. Many argue that this is not the case. However, one needs only to measure the levels of enthusiasm expressed in children, for the Christmas's different components. I mean, all you have to do is go ask a child on Christmas what he's so excited about, and you'll quickly learn that his glowing eyes are all about the Nintendo Wii or the new Tickle Me Elmo, Whatever kids may be trained to say by their parents or pastors, this is the real fruit, the real proof of the pudding, watching their enthusiasm. I'm going to try to be as gentle as possible on this here. There's a lot of really, really good, loving Christian people who really sincerely do love the Lord. They've never heard of these things. They've never studied the historical origins of these traditions. I don't want to come down too hard on anybody, but now, considering the unprecedented falling away from the church and atheism, it is vitally important that we check ourselves. We have to come to grips with the reality of this issue. Continuing to associate our Messiah with these ancient heathen practices and some of these ridiculous fairy tales is only really accelerating this falling away from the church, especially with the youth. This new generation is not investing its heart and soul in what it perceives to be an obsolete fiction that demands our attention. The Christian church today doesn't have the monopoly on our attention that it used to have maybe more than 50 years ago. The church today is competing with a entertainment-saturated type society where these old fairy tales are not going to really cut it anymore. They're going to have to come to grips with and embrace the reality of who Jesus really was, rather than insisting that the lies we inherited from our fathers are somehow true. It is an irrefutable historical fact that Christmas, its date of December 25th, the decorated tree, the majority of its traditions, are a continuation of Nimrod's Babylonian winter solstice sun worship festivals that were later modified to engulf and absorb Christianity into itself. However well-meaning quoting the soundbite that Jesus is the reason for the season may be, that soundbite really has become atheist rocket fuel. And also, if you just consider the facts and the reality, it is that soundbite is also bearing a gross false witness against the true Son of God in lowering him to the same level as the sick, twisted heathen sun gods, which his people continuously battled with throughout the entire scriptures. I mean, any kid with the ability to read can quickly pick up an encyclopedia or a world religion textbook and quickly learn that the focal point of the entire Christian year has been stolen directly from ancient paganism. I mean, millions of young people who learn these historical facts, that they quickly assimilate Jesus with all the other sun gods, thanks in part to the unwitting insistence of the various denominations that Jesus is the reason for the season. Children of this generation aren't settling with fairy tales anymore. They're discarding them. due to our repeated stubbornness in our adulteration with this Babylonian paganism over the centuries, Jesus is now perceived by a majority of Christians to be a fairy tale. I mean, if you study the polls asking Christians, even pastors, what they really believe, you'll see what I'm talking about. Christianity has become a cultural feather in the hat, like a dash of color or a family heirloom.
Leave it open for questions, thoughts, or comments on kind of what we just took a look at tonight.
Yeah, I got some questions. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The videos that we just watched, the one about Christmas and all of that. How much have you gone into research on to figure out how, I guess, the details of it?
I've looked into that before. This is not the first time I've looked into the idea of the parts of Christmas, but I've done a study before. I might have it still on my old videos of Semiramis and Nimrod and everything else. Semiramis and Nimrod actually go way back into Genesis, and then they line up with what he said about the Tower of Babel. They actually line up with what people view, especially in Roman Catholicism, of Mary and baby Jesus, quote unquote. So their viewpoint of who they think Mary is Semiramis. Who they view baby Jesus is baby Nimrod. And so when they see an angry looking Jesus looking to come back and do certain things and attack, that's what he will do in the future to his enemies. But that's Nimrod, how they see him today. Like they think Jesus is angry and he's going to look to impute sin and attack everybody now, when actually that's not what he's doing at all today. That is Nimrod. That is Semiramis. The Mary that they think is that Semiramis. I've done studies on that before. So when I saw that video, getting back to what you said, it only confirmed what I've already studied before in the past. So I used that in order to teach this on Christmas, because we've avoided Christmas for years. We've stayed away from Christmas. We've written it off because we didn't want to not only be part of the hype of trying to buy presents and set up the house and put up the lights and get the tree. Once we knew it had nothing to do with Christ, we wrote it off. Yeah, we wrote it off 10 years ago. Yeah. Hey, he wasn't born on the 25th. Yeah.
So that video basically summarizes the research that you did without you having to make the video, essentially.
Yeah, once I saw that it was like-minded with what I saw, I pretty much ran with it because I've seen this. I've seen these things taught before, and I said this is pretty spot on.
Okay, so the going back with Egypt and all of that, that's all. Have you watched that entire part 3 series?
Yeah, part 1, part 2, part 3. I'm trying to think if there was anything in there. I went only up into part 3. Up into part 3, I stopped at 3 minutes and 52 seconds. So there must have been something after 3 minutes and 52 seconds on part 3 that I didn't like. So I would stop there when you.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
But on part 3, after 3 minutes and 52 seconds, that's where I must have come across something where I said, let's stop after that point.
Well, plus, John, didn't the timeline also, a lot of research was done on that, and that corroborates that as well. You know, the beginning, like when Mary conceived and so on. Yeah.
Timeline also shows that as well. From the first one, where you see the timeline of it was the 8th month she conceived, so that 9 months later it's September, October on the Jewish calendar. And plug in the Jewish calendar and how that timeline works compared to the videos of what you're seeing of how they're plugging in everything that has to do with Egypt, that has to do with Mithra, because they also take all these different, weeping for Tammuz from Ezekiel, and all these other things that Moses had to deal with concerning the issues of his day as well. You're seeing all these false gods plugging in. They go all the way back to Nimrod. And as they go forward with that, this is how this comes into play. So, and then the Jehovah Witnesses, they know this too, but unfortunately, they make this part of their works-oriented salvation thing. Like if you have to do this in order to be a true Jehovah Witness type of thing. We're more so, we want to obey Christ because we want to. And so this is not a mandatory mandate, got to do it. It's just we throw the information out there, like you saw in the video. And it's a beneficial thing that everybody knows what the true understanding, what the true reason, reason for the season, what the true reason is. Now, what people do with the information is up to them, because this is not a make or break issue. Salvation is the make or break issue. This is just beneficial information for everyone to know so that they can understand it. If someone's out there celebrating Christmas on December 25th and they trust the gospel, they're still saved. They're still going to heaven. They're still, part of the body of Christ. There's, this is not a make or break issue, but it is something that can be presented and everyone can know about it and everyone can understand. Why is everybody doing what they're doing?
I have to say that I heard this information probably 7 to 10 years ago. We never used Halloween. It was always just a fun time to let the kids pretend who they were. We could never do witches, or, they were cowboys and they were princesses, and it was a time for us to go along with their play. Thanksgiving was always a time to thank the Lord and get together with the family. Christmas was not, we let them believe in Santa, but that wasn't our main point. Our main point was always Jesus' birth. Now I know that that's not the date of his birth, but that can be a date of commemorating it with family. But a disconnect a hypocritical part in my life is I celebrate the things and I say, I'm so far from those symbolisms that I didn't even know what the tree represented. And it came just to be family time and, time to think of the Lord's birth. But where I am a hypocrite is probably that yoga is the same thing. All those poses are symbolism. We're pretty disconnected from that symbolism, but I have an issue with yoga. So I know that's not right.
Well, the thing with yoga is it's more, there's multiple different, I guess, tiers to what yoga actually is, from my perspective and from what I've learned. One, there's the spiritualistic side of it, doing all of that. And then two, there's the next one would be like the medical stretching, stuff like that. You can do all of those poses and stuff because they do alleviate stress or
I've heard
depression on your spine, stuff like that, without going into the whole worshiping aspect of it.
You'll find aspects of yoga poses and yoga stretches in physical therapy, occupational therapy, that kind of thing, because stretching the muscles and so on is good. So that part of it, the exercise part of it, is something that is good for our bodies. But you're right, there is a spiritual side. However, in the exercise classes, I don't feel that there is that. It's there for exercise. And Ryan, like you said, stress and breathing exercises that my brother-in-law was telling me he had to do for physical therapy were a lot of things that were covered in yoga classes too. So there is a medical side to it.
I do see that, and I know people that swear by it because it's helped their back or their whatever. I struggle. I struggle with that issue because I have a friend whose daughter is in Costa Rica, and because of COVID, she couldn't do what she was sent there as a missionary to do. So she started doing holy yoga, and I've had trouble supporting her since then. So like I said, it's hypocritical of me. I'm still trying to work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question for you, John. The what's his YouTube channel? The something Taurus Rex. That's where the where that YouTube video came from for the Signs of Christmas. Do you know what I'm talking about? I'm pretty sure I've watched some of some of his videos before. What's your thoughts on his content and stuff like that?
I can agree with this, but if I can find something where most of it is generally like-minded and I can present it, I'm going to present where it's pretty much like-minded and the messages are in agreement, then I can go ahead and present them. I've seen some of the videos where a lot of it goes off track, and because I was looking at some of them today, even as a reminder or refresher, and some of them I'm trying to remember what the menu was on it, because I looked through his playlist, I looked at some of his menus. Some of it didn't look 100%, there. Like I could show all his videos tonight or something and be content with it. But some of them, like on the other hand, he's kind of like a hit and miss. I can show one thing and it's going to come out great, and then I could use that and say that this was something that I could build upon. Another thing I'd say, I just can't run with this. So as far as us doctrinally, on equal ground, he's going to be hit and miss. He's going to have a video where I can say this, I can work with this. And the other video is going to be, well, I can't run with that. So he's kind of hit and miss.
All right.
So
One of the things that gave me problem with these types of stories, whatever, the people that introduced me to that went off into the Hebrew roots movement, and it just sort of destroyed their whole, their whole premise, I guess, for me, because I saw what they went off into, but they were never into right dividing, so.
Yeah, we had someone join our study for a while. She had a family member in the Hebrew roots movement, and she was being pretty trampled upon for a while.
Yeah, the church that I was going to, this couple really tore things up for a while there, and I was kind of in trouble for turning them in. So it was a big deal, and it kind of soured me on all that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, absolutely. Is there any other thoughts or comments on anything? These are some good topics we're bringing up tonight. And Ryan, you had some good questions. You had some good points.
Off script, have you heard anything from what was that church that I went to?
Yeah, and then Leslie was here this weekend. We watched the Grace Ambassador seminar. That was a great seminar. They had a lot of good information about walking, rightly dividing our walk, walking in the Lord, walking as dead, walking in the Spirit. It was a great seminar. We just had to keep refreshing the screen every so often. They would teach, and then you'd have to refresh the screen to watch the next speaker, and then you have to keep refreshing it to make sure that you keep keeping up with them and all. But it was a great edifying lesson on our walk. So we benefited from that. Yeah, Leslie came out. She came from Mississippi, came over here. We answered some of her questions. We were able to, there's a basket she gave us. So everything worked out pretty good. So people came out, and that was about it. But then I just wanted to do a study tonight on what's coming up, October, November, December. Christ isn't in what we think he's in, and people are going to try to tell you. You'll see the commercials, you'll see the bumper stickers, you'll hear it coming up. Jesus is the reason for the season. They're going to be trying to put Jesus into things that he was never in. The Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays thing's going to come up, and it doesn't matter. It's not. It's more so about 1 Corinthians 15 than it is Merry Christmas versus Happy Holidays. These are not salvation issues.
So what you're saying is when somebody brings it up, we need to tell them that they're worshiping a phallus. on Christmas?
You could, I mean, that essentially, what you do is you just bypassed a whole bunch of point. You got right to the point in about 3 seconds, which is going to blow their mind. But you just got right to the point, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I could have got there faster, but I was trying to figure out a family friendly word.
You did exactly right. You just got right to it in about 3 seconds. And for us, we know exactly what you're talking about. Because we just went through it for about an hour. We broke it down. We got into it with videos and studies, charts, and everything else. But as you explain that to somebody for the first time, they're going to say, "What are you talking about?" They do their shopping, they do their presents and their trees and everything else, and you come forth and you spring the truth on them. They've never heard that before. They're going to say, "Oh, what are you talking about? This makes no sense." Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've had some atheistic friends, like in high school, and maybe middle school, actually bring up that exact scenario, the whole with the Christmas tree and all of that being a pagan holiday, and they actually said you're worshiping a penis and all of that, and like, what? No way. And looking back on it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's the truth. And the atheists are more looking so, but their agenda is more so to stop you from reading and believing and studying and understanding God. Also leaning on their side, which is don't worship yourself. That which is viewpoint. They're just trying to say you're worshiping, and even Islam will say that Christianity is nothing more than pagan rituals turned, they're just Christianized. And that is Roman Catholicism. Yes, that is what they do. That is Roman Catholicism. Absolutely, 100% you're right. That is what has unfortunately ruled on what you now. But yeah, that is what it is too.
All right. Yeah. One of the guy that I was talking to today, we got to really talking about certain just topics in general. I was telling him about the study and stuff, this group and stuff, and he was bringing up, because we were talking about doubt and stuff like that, and he was saying how one of his friends had that problem, and he was talking about how all of these other, like the religions of the world, you got Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, they all Buddha believed Jesus was a god. Islam thought Jesus was a prophet. We obviously believe he's God, and Judaism knew he was a person. All of these world religions and stuff go off of, or they all believe Jesus was real. And he never left more than 30 miles within his home. He was a carpenter. And I forgot the other point that he brought up, but it was all very small, not small following, but I forget the other point. It was anyways, but they're all linked to Jesus in a way. They just have their own twist on it, and it all comes back to, I mean, if you have doubt that Jesus wasn't a person, right there's your answer. All of these world religions are all linked to Jesus.
Yeah, the historical account of them, at least.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's That's one way to look at it. The point he mentioned about how I can't remember the other ones, but how like he never left more than 30 miles from his home and all of that, and he's heard about throughout the entire world. Brought up a really good. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
Huh? Name dropper. Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting. I sort of knew, but I didn't realize Buddhists believe that Jesus was a god. Um, I knew Islam knew he was a prophet, and that kind of made me go, oh, okay, well, I don't know, just it sparked something in me that kind of started making my brain turn a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, they do that. Different. Let me get her out of here. The different religions do that, but only one faith will say that he's, God manifested in the flesh, the fullness of the Godhead bodily. Everyone else will say he's a nice guy, he's just a guy, he's a prophet, he's this, but only we declare him to be, according to the scriptures, rightly divided, God manifested in the flesh. And that's where we got to figure out, what's right, the scriptures or other religions, that type of thing. And like you said, they declare him to be an actual individual. It's just what the story of the actual individual. Yeah, all good stuff. All good stuff. So yeah, and I think you invited him into the chat room. I thought I saw you invite somebody there.
Yeah, I still got to send him a couple more messages. So I was telling him about Grace Ambassadors and stuff like that. We were talking for probably well over an hour. How it really started about talking about guns, and then it went to crazy scenarios, and he started talking about how in the Bible it talks about a sea turning to red and ships sinking somewhere. I can't remember exactly what it was. Like, then there's a volcano right now erupting that's going to be could cause a potential tidal wave. A bunch of ships in the harbor, and he's like, "Hey, and who knows way things are headed." And we got talking a little bit more, and told him how started talking about. He said he was a Christian and all of that, and so I was like, "Yeah, I knew that," and we eventually got talking about the Bible study and learning his view on Christianity and where he lined up and stuff. And yeah, it was pretty productive. It actually helped me a little bit too, which was kind of interesting.
That's good. Good. Yeah, you're able to talk with someone. I mean, if it helps and you're able to get some input, invite him over to Grace Ambassadors, invite him over to us, whatever works for him, whatever. If we can help him out, we can help you out, whatever, whatever works.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I don't know if there was any other thoughts on the seasons and those. Jim, did you get all those links? I think we just had those two main.
I sent all of them in the chat itself. The first one, and then actually I listed them in order.
Okay, so the one with the. The second one was pretty good. I think the second one was just pretty much all of it. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, the chart on the first one for like 3 minutes and 9 seconds, and then all of the second one showing all that history in there. Should show enough. And think just showing that will be enough to kind of go forward with everything, and we could, just more towards the end when we because try to make it October, November, December. You can just kind of throw those videos in towards the December. It's so rough. The camera cut out, so we had to kind of move to alternative measures. But yeah. Hopefully get this up and running for Sunday. We'll get things moving a little bit better. We'll get things back up to full capacity, and then we'll be good to go. So, if anyone has any other thoughts on everything, but we're glad we're back again. It was a good ambassadors seminar this past weekend. Leslie here, and we'll keep going forward on this Sunday. We'll have another study, and we'll be hopefully back up and running on the regular screen here. So we'll do that, and then we'll continue in the chat room. I know we're helping you out, Glory. With I know you're trying to reach everybody with the issues of Calvinism. I know that's
Yeah, it's coming at me from all angles. I've had like 3 people this week, or not this week, last week it was actually, but they've been emailing me links to study other people, and I'm like, no, I know what I believe, it's not this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's helpful to have you guys to bounce it off of. Thank you.
Yeah. If anything, when they send you a link, send them something from Grace Ambassadors under the Calvinism topic. If they send you something, you send them something.
Okay, yeah, I guess I could do that.
As they send you some, say, hey, you read my thing, I read your thing, and if they say no to that, then what happens.
Okay.
Just as you just find the first Calvinism link that you find on Grace Ambassadors, and maybe kind of throw it back their way. So,
All right. Good thought.
yeah. So with that, we'll wrap up. We'll see everybody. It's meant to be, yeah. The world. So, yeah, we'll wrap up. We'll see everyone in the chat rooms, and we'll meet up here on Sunday.
All right. Bye. Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week. See you Sunday, I hope.
Okay.
All right.
Grace and peace. Bye-bye.